Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm Jennifer LaRue. I'm the Director of Public Programs at the Mark Twain House and Museum in Hartford, Connecticut, and I'm delighted to be hosting this evening's book talk with this amazing book, The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, which we'll be talking about this evening. I'm not going to take up too much time. I do have a few things I want to talk with you about before I introduce tonight's speakers. First of all, welcome, and I'm so glad to see so many people in our audience tonight from all over the place. Looks like we have some old friends returning and some new friends introducing themselves for the first time. So please continue to chat among yourselves throughout the program in the chat area. That's part of the fun of the platform we use, which is Crowdcast. And as Jacques has pointed out, thank you, Jacques, hit play if your program has not launched automatically. Sometimes it works that way and sometimes it doesn't. So yes, please keep chatting. But toward the end of our evening, we're going to do Q&A. And if you have a question for Stephen or Joe, please put it in the Ask a Question section, which you see at the bottom in the middle of the screen there. That makes it a lot easier for us to manage that part of the program. So please help us out with that if you can. Right above that, you'll see a greenish bar that says Birdies for Charity. I want to talk about that for a moment. So this has been quite a year for the Mark Twain House and Museum, as it has been for everybody across the world. And we have really worked hard to maintain a connection with our community and provide these programs free of charge for the most part to keep ourselves current and engaged with folks. But we have been for most of the past year without our major source of revenue, which is our guided house tour. Now, I'm delighted to say we're back in business as far as that goes. Starting this past weekend, we began offering those house tours again on a very limited COVID-safe basis, and we sold out. So thank you for those of you who came out to tour the house. But it has been quite a financial challenge for us to make it through this year. And one of the things that has kept us going are donations from people like yourself who have taken advantage of opportunities to participate in our programs and have clicked that green button and donated whatever they're able to spare to support us. So I just want you to know that whatever you are able to share with us along those lines, the staff and board of trustees deeply appreciates your contributions and puts every single penny to really good use, including making it possible to continue programs such as this. This is a particularly good time to make a donation because the Travelers Golf Championship has a Birdies for Charity program that adds 15% to your donations. So you get a lot of extra bang for your buck if you're able to share some funds with us during this time. So please do that if you're able. We do offer tons and tons of programs. I believe now through about the 1st of June or even a little later, we're offering 3 programs a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday every week. And so it's a great variety of diverse group of speakers and authors that we're presenting. There's too many for me to rattle off right now, so I encourage you to visit us at marktwainhouse.org and check out our digital offerings. And you can also watch all our past ones there as well. So I encourage you to join us there. And you can take a virtual tour of the Twain House, too, if you've not been able to make it to Hartford to see the house itself. It's a spectacular place to visit in person. I hope you all come in person sometime, but for now, take advantage of that opportunity. So having said all that, I want to introduce our guests. Tonight we have with us Joe Lansdale, who has written novels and short stories in many genres, including Western, horror, science fiction, mystery, and suspense. He's written for comics and Batman, the animated series. As of 2020, listen to this, he's written 50 novels and published more than 30 short story collections, or maybe 40 by now, along with many chapbooks and comic book adaptations. And he would just really hear, he's super fun to talk with. Stephen Graham Jones is a New York Times bestselling author of 25 or so novels and collections, and some novellas and comic books too. He's been an NEA recipient, has won the Texas Institute of Letters Award for Fiction, the Independent Publishers Award for Multicultural Fiction, a Bram Stoker Award, and many other honors, I should say. He's also made the Bloody Disgusting's top 10 horror novels. He wrote Mongrels and The Only Good Indians, which we're about to talk about tonight. And he's working on My Heart is a Chainsaw, which is coming up soon. He lives in Boulder, Colorado. So please, everyone, join me in welcoming our guests this evening, Stephen and Joe. Give Joe a second to come on screen. There you go. Thank you both for being here this evening.
Howdy.
And before I get off screen, I want to point out that signed copies of The Only Good Indians are available for purchase through our museum store. We'll be posting the link over and over again in the chat. We know we're no dummies. We know you can buy this from other sources, but if you choose to purchase it through us, first of all, you get a signed copy, and also you have the benefit of knowing that your purchase supports the Mark Twain House and Museum. And I just want you to see how dog-eared my copy is. So tell us about this book. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll pop back for Q&A at the end. Welcome.
Thank you.
Steve, I'm going to take over and start this introduction here. Stephen Graham Jones is a writer that I recommend to everybody. Everybody always says, who do you recommend? And as old as I am, I always say, oh, that new guy, Stephen Graham Jones. And then I look up and realize, man, he ain't new at all. He's solid. He's in here. He's one of the men now, and one of the writers that has made a real impact in not only horror, but just literature in general. And I'm really happy for him and proud to know him, because I knew when he was just beginning to start publishing, and he's published a lot since then. He's also somebody that's a pioneer in the sense that he's willing to sort of machete his way through new places, and he's willing to let different kinds of ideas and genres and what have you blend together. And so we're going to talk about a book that does that tonight. We will even have to say basketball is involved. There's all kinds of things here. Stephen, before we discuss the book per se, we'll go right into that. Let's kind of come sideways to it, because I think that the book has so much of who you are, at least from the standpoint of your background, your social interest, different things like that. I'd like for you to give us a little bit of a nutshell of who you are, where you come from, and why you think that writing this book was important to you.
Man, I come from West Texas, way out in the pastures. Like our place was so little, we didn't have a post office, and like playing with a ball on the playground of elementary, you'd throw it over the fence, and everybody would stand there like, who's going to get it? Because where it went was into the cemetery of the church, and you had to go pick through the gravestones to get the gravestones of all the people with your name on the gravestones, which is always, it's kind of chilling to be playing kickball and have to do that, But I grew up in West Texas, man. And I never went to East Texas till a lot later in my life, till your part of the country, man. But I can go there all the time in your books, that's pretty great. And man, shoot, my life in a nutshell. I don't know. I went to Texas Tech University. I got married to the girl I met when I was 19. We're still married. Shoot, we've been married 25 years. Well, we've been together about 30, I guess. And I don't know, grew up hunting, working on trucks, shooting bows and guns and stabbing myself with knives. And I grew up I grew up working off a tractor and working off a horse. Those are the two main things like coming up. Every morning somebody put a hoe in my hands or some reins in my hands, and I'd have to do that for 10 or 12 hours. It wasn't the rose fields, but it gets pretty hot in West Texas all the same.
It's the same. It sucks. Yeah. If you kicked the ball into that cemetery and someone had kicked it back, then that's when you
man. Yeah, for sure, man. For sure.
Well, the reason I asked that is because I already know a little bit about you. I met you first in West Texas when you invited me out to speak to the class you were teaching. The thing that occurs to me is that this book, well, before I talk about the book itself, let me talk about the style of the book, which I think is, some people may not agree with me, but I think it's experimental as well as being traditional. It's a mixture of those things. And I like the fact that you do that, because for me, it gives it a different edge. It's not just another booger story, because it also has not only style, it has a thematic depth that I think the person that's used to saying, well, I just want to read a horror story to be scared, that's not what you're doing. And I'm not trying to disappoint anybody. I just don't think that's all there is to the book. And I'm not suggesting that that's bad if that's what you want. But what I think is that you gave us a lot more. You told us a little bit about who you are really and where you came from and how you feel about things and how your experience as having, being Native American, being Blackfeet, influences how you think and how you write and the subjects that are close to you. And what do you, am I in the ballpark here? Am I
No,
hitting on?
You definitely are. Like, let's see, in this book here, I had it pulled out because I was visiting a class in Mongrels. The werewolf
it's a
novel.
great book.
Well, thank you. I have a scene in there where the kid goes into a convenience store and the clerk is watching him. He is like lasered in on him from the time he walks in the door, every little place he goes. And that's how it's been for me my whole entire life. Every convenience store I go in, I know that I'm in every mirror, and I know the people up behind the glass are watching me, and they're just waiting for me to steal something. And I know it's because of my hair, it's because of the color of my skin, it's because I got a chain on my wallet, it's because my pants got holes, whatever it is. Which I always thought it was for two reasons. They're watching me for two reasons. Number one, because I was Indian. Number two, because I probably was going to steal something, but
So they were a good judge of character. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they were.
Oh, that's funny. Well, when I was younger, it's hard to believe now, but I used to have hair almost down to my waist. I was refused to go to college because of it. And people would look at me just because my hair was long. And of course, I was 18 through 25 when my hair was really long. But as soon as they'd see me, wow, that dirty hippie, he's going to steal something. And I'll have I washed every day. But my clothes were, they were poor, and I meant for them to be. It was the style, But no, I get that, and I think that it's important to understand when you read this book that you mentioned hunting, and obviously that's a big part of it. And there's the relationship between animals and humans is also a big part of this book, both positively and negatively. And I always felt that it was more representative, and I don't want to overdo that because I'm not one of these guys that wants to tell you what the rose is in the Scarlet Letter or something. I don't want to overdo that, but nonetheless, I think any good book has what I think of as echo. People might call it theme, but to me, it's echo. It's not where you plan to say, well, I'm going to say this with this book, but it's where the theme grows out of who you are as you write. Yeah. And I'm not saying I wasn't there with you. You may have planned a whole lot more of this than I feel, but it felt so wonderfully spontaneous. And it felt like that you were touching on not only the guilt that these people have for what they've done, but it was representative of a sort of guilt for maybe cultural distancing, partly, and also just the guilt that any of us carry through life for the mistakes that we've made. We've all made them. Some of us have made some pretty bad ones. Some of us have made at least some things that we're ashamed of. And for me, in the book, that's what it had. And in that scene, that's for me, was very stream of consciousness that opens up stream of conscious writing that opens up the book. I felt all kinds of things. I felt obviously the fear of him being out there, someone after him, and not a group that was going to be kind to him for obvious reasons. And for me also, there was all this cultural aspect tied into it, and all these things that he thought about the elk and about, and I love the way it shifted thoughts and shifted the moments. And to me, I guess that's the part that I think of. Maybe it's not experimental in the William S. Burroughs tradition, thank goodness, but it is very Kerouac. It is very modern in my view, and for me, it made the book more enticing because I think had the book been written in a flat style and it was not really about those thematic issues, I don't think I'd have cared. What mattered was the characters, and what mattered was the style, because the style in your books, and I like to think this is true in mine too, they're a character. The book itself is a character, and you do that marvelously. And I just like you did with Mongrels, which I think is the best werewolf novel I've ever read, and I've read a bunch of them. And but I do believe, and your style changes. I can read something and I always know it's you, but there's something different because you're trying to say something different. You're trying to tell us something different. So when you were doing this, did you just get caught up in it and let it go, or how did it work?
You know, you're right that you only figure out the theme later. You figure out what you're writing about after you've written it, you know, or else somebody tells you and you're like, yeah, I guess so, whatever, you know. Yeah, the editor I'm working with, the editor I worked with on this one and on my next one, Joe Monty, he reads my books and he tells me back the theme, and I'm like, if you say so. But I was just trying to have fun. I was just trying to watch some people go through a meat grinder of some sort, you know. But The Only Good Indians does come from a real place, and that real place for me is back in 2007. I was up on the reservation and I got a cow elk and, you know, got her processed up, brought her home in a big cooler to West Texas. And then like 3 or 4 months later, bam, I was moving up to Colorado and I hadn't eaten all that elk yet. And whenever I take an animal in the field, I always like promise to it that this was terrible, but it's for good. You know, I'm not just shooting you for the heck of it. I'm shooting you to feed my family. All of you is going to go to use, you know? I mean, it's not some stupid thing like, no, it's not stupid, but it's not something like, we use every part of the buffalo. It's not that, but it's like, this isn't just taking a trophy, you know? I mean, who's going to shoot a cow elk for a trophy in the first place? But then 3 or 4 months later, I was moving and couldn't take that elk meat with me. So I had to go up and down the street I lived on, handing out, you know, elk roasts and ribs and stuff. And once I got up to Colorado, I started wondering, why would those people trust me? You know, I was just that dude who plays basketball in his driveway all the time. They don't know. I mean, I could have given them poison meat as far as they know, or raccoon meat. And I started to suspect that maybe they threw it away, and which means I broke my promise to that elk. And like when I know it's stupid probably, but I feel like when you break a promise, you're asking for something bad to happen to you, you know? And so I had like, I don't know, 8 or 10 years where I was feeling bad about the chance that one of my neighbors had thrown away that elk meat I'd given him. And so finally I wrote The Only Good Indians. And you're right that kind of guilt to me was infusing everything, and not just the guilt, but the result of that guilt, the retribution that comes back at you, you know, for breaking that promise.
Yeah. Well, when you were thanking the elk was probably going, now say what now?
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Oh,
yeah. Yeah, no, I find that so fascinating because it is a germ of a thing that's more than a germ inside your head. But I mean, it's a germ of an idea. If I tell you that idea, or you just told us that idea, it seems small, but it's significant, because I think we all travel through life with our guilts and as well as our successes and all these different things. But the guilt sometimes are remembered. I mean, I honestly feel pretty good about myself, but still, I have things that I think, you know, I could have just spoke differently. I could have been a little more patient. You know, I could have done this or I could have done that. And, you know, I even look at my wife and I raising our kids. My wife did just fine, but sometimes I think maybe I could have done better. And yet they turned out great. And the guilt doesn't make much sense, but we all have it and we all carry it with us. And I think as writers, that we try so hard to express ideas. I'm not much interested in a book that's purely about plot. I like that once in a while. I can be enjoyment, but I like that echo of that comes from the inside of the author's head, whoever she or he is. I want to feel that. I want to feel that difference. It doesn't have to be that they're unique, that they climbed, you know, Everest or sailed around the world on a log or something like that. But it does mean that inside our heads are all these interesting things. Sometimes they're harpies. For some people, they're nothing but harpies. For some of us, they're teddy bears. And for some of us, it's kind of a mixture. But you get that through the prose, and you get it through the characters and how they act. But the prose explains the characters. I think how something is written is highly underrated, because you can't express character as well, or dialogue as well, or have that echo that a good book has without that style. And that's one of the things I most enjoyed about your work.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the same as you. I look for sincerity on the page. I want to feel like the writer cares about this, whatever it is, whatever the content, that the content doesn't really matter to me. What I want is to know that this matters deeply to them. You know, they're not just doing an exercise. But yeah, Joe, you know, you're one of the people, you say you feel like you're a good person, and I can tell everybody what is this, an anecdote? I don't know why I can't come up with that word, but I was driving you through Denver once. I remember, this is, I don't know, 10 years ago. I don't remember when. And we're at an intersection, and there's a homeless dude pushing his bike across through the crosswalk. And about halfway through the crosswalk, I don't know if you remember this, he fell down. His leg was bad or something. And, I think everybody at the other 3 lights, they all groaned like, oh man, we're going to sit through this light. But if everybody, like, there's probably 80 people there, you're the one person who jumped out of the car and ran up to him and helped him, And I think if you live your life like that, then no, you're not going to have a lot of regrets, and that was a model.
Well, you try.
Yeah. That was a model for me. I mean, the same as,
thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah. That's the same as when you and I were on a panel back in 2002 in Austin, I think 2002, that Conan panel.
Yeah.
In the Q&A period, someone asked you, they said, hey Joe, what genre do you write in? And you said, I write in the Joe R. Lansdale genre. And like a bell went off my head, and I'm like, that's where I want to be. That's what I want to do with my life. It was nice. So
Bram Jones shot.
Yeah. That's what I've been aiming for ever since.
And this is just kind of funny, and this is not to say anything good about me, but it's just funny, is that when my agent looked at your work, he loved it, but he said, I've already got one of you. Somebody hard to pinpoint, and I know too. And when I admire your integrity, because I know that, and I won't say what, but I know you had a deal with a book that they wanted you to write a book like a book that you had done, and you chose not to. You said, no, that's it. I'm out. And you had a contract. You were set. You were ready to rock, and you moved on. I admire that, and I think when people think that writers like us, who are very heavily influenced by genre, but you and I are also influenced by literature and movies and comics and fist fights in behind the Dairy Queen, all of those things. I think that they sometimes think that all we do is write for money. I want to be paid. I make a living doing this. It's all I do. And I especially want to be paid because I want to keep doing this wonderful thing that I get up and do every day. But I don't want to put a sack over its head and do it for old glory, as they used to say.
Yeah.
I want to do it as best I can. So even if you read a story of mine you don't like, I didn't just do it for the hell of it. And some stories are more whimsical. Some stories are lighter. Some stories are more powerful. Some stories are darker. But every time I did it, I meant to do what I did as well as I could. And I did the best I could on the day I did it. And that's all I can really, say about that. And I think that's agree. What I admire about you. Yeah. Because I know many genre writers, unfortunately, that it's just like a program, it's got, I got to get this done. And then Bill comes in, and where's the characterization come in? And then, aren't I supposed to have some dialogue here? And I don't think that's the way to write. And when I read your books, they're very explosive in the way they're written. I also like the fact that I never feel like now it's time for me to give the lecture. Now, which was one of my sometimes grievous faults, I have to admit, but now it's time to bring in this certain amount of characterization. Now it's time to bring in the romance. All of these things circulate in your head, I'm sure, but I don't ever feel that it's gimmicked. Yeah.
No, for sure. I totally agree. And talking about jumping to a different place from book to book, like the rule I always have for myself is that, I don't write any book that I know I can write, I mean, I know that I can cover 300 pages with no problem. That, as far as that goes, that doesn't intimidate me. But whenever I'm thinking about a book and I'm trying to imagine how it would go step by step, I never can think of it all. If I can think it all the way through, then I'm like, why would I do that? I want to do a book that's built to fail.
I don't outline or I just have to have some energy or something that gets me going. So
for sure.
And I can sense that. And and I sense that in the best way. It's not the same way when you have someone that they don't know what they're doing. It's that when I get in it, I know that I'm getting in a car and you're driving and I'm in good hands. You're not going to run off the road, but you know what? You might jump a ditch. You might take a fast curve. I don't know any of that, but I feel like I'm in good hands. I feel like I'm in experienced hands because in my case, I've been doing this almost 50 years as a full-time and all my life since I was 4 years old. And I have the confidence I can sit down and write any 300, 400-page novel effortlessly, but I don't want to do that. Some like Hap and Leonard, I have a series, so they are who they are, but I still push them a little. I push them into different experiences. And then when I try to write novels, in fact, I was working on one the other day, and I said, you know what? This is too damn easy. This is too damn effortless. It's supposed to read effortless, but it's not supposed to be, empty. It's not supposed to be tapioca pudding. I need at least some raisins in this son of a bitch,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, I completely agree. If it's not built to fail, then why would I try,
Yeah, absolutely. And you want to, if you do that too, that people aren't getting the same old thing. And it's also a matter of readership. Some readers want the same comfortable pair of shoes. That's why, and this is not knocking bestsellers, because there's many of them that are outstanding, and you hit the bestseller list too. I mean, but there is a certain pattern that some people want. I want to get up. I want the same little shoes. I want the same, coat. I want everything just the same. And so they read a certain kind of book written by a certain kind of author that knows that their job is to deliver the same book they wrote last time, but in this one, somebody wears a different hat, but it's still the same book. And I'm not knocking that. I've read a bunch of them myself, but I think that it's our job as writers to try to reach beyond. And you're also a teacher. So what I would ask you is that when you teach, how do you try to inspire your students more than tell them how to do it? Or how do you work?
I try to, number one, I just try to model what I consider good writer behavior, which is to say I bring in my acceptances and my rejections and my difficulties with editors or reviews or whatever it is, and I bring that to them and show them that just because I've got like X amount of books published doesn't mean this is easy street. I still I'll have magazines solicit stories for me for their debut issue. I'll mail them a story and they mail it back and they say, maybe not this one, like that kind of stuff. And that never stops. And I think it's good to get rejected. I think I might be scared if I ever stopped getting rejected, because then I would think everything I did was gold, and everything I do is not gold. The reason I can try novels that I think are built to fail is that I'm not afraid of throwing away 300 pages, because I've got thousands more pages in me. I'm not scared of ever running out of juice, running out of ideas. I'm always going to have words and stories to tell. Some of them I'll screw up, and some of them I'll get lucky with.
Well, there's something about being vetted too. When you go out and somebody else is reading it, it's easy to just get it and self-publish it. That doesn't mean it's bad, but it's certainly if I get stacks and stacks of self-published books, and what I will tell you is 98% of them are awful, and 1%'s okay, and then there's 1% that's maybe great. Now you can make that claim too of published books, but I don't think it's the same. I think published books are generally on a better level, even books I don't care for, because they have been vetted.
Yeah, for sure.
I literally, I haven't had many rejection slips in my later life. But that said, I always write with the understanding that I can fail. Philip Jose Farmer, who is one of my favorite writers, once told me, he said, he said, what you need to do when you're really, really writing, you need to climb out on the limb and not be afraid to saw off the end you're sitting on. And I thought about that, and I understood what he meant, because if it's I'd rather read an interesting failure than a bland success.
Oh man, for sure.
And I have a lot of interesting failures, believe me.
No, I completely agree. Somebody said the other day, I heard they said jump off the cliff and build your wings on the way down. That's the way I write. Yeah, he said that.
That's Ray Bradbury. He said that. Yeah,
right. I can. That's what I said.
And he was right. He's right. You got to keep the magic in it too. It's a job in one sense, because I get up every day and I do it, and I stick to it, and I make a living at it. But I'm happy every day. I think every day, how did I end up doing this? Well, coming from East Texas, I have a high school education, a couple of years of college, scattered. And by the way, you're one of the young doctorates. You're like one of those guys that's kind of like the genius in the bunch, But I did that, and I have to get up every morning and my feet hit the floor, and I say, I am one happy son of a bitch. I get to do exactly what I want to do.
No, exactly. People ask me about writer's block, And I mean, to me, writer's block is just having your standards set too high, really. So just dial your standards down and get something on the page. You can fix it later. But you know, but what my answer to writer's block, people, I say, you know, the ditch diggers get ditch diggers block, the waiters get waiter block, and they actually do. They wake up every morning with ditch digger block, but they go to work anyway. That's what you do as a writer. You know, you go to work anyway.
Absolutely. I love that example. Yeah. And, you know, I think one of it is that you and I both did a lot of, we like to refer to them as blue collar jobs, but some of mine didn't have collars. And I would say that, you know, I worked in the rose fields. I was a bouncer. I worked in an aluminum chair factory. I was a janitor for many, many years. Good grief. The list of the crap that I did, including digging ditches. You know, my mom said, if you don't get an education, you're going to end up digging ditches. And I'll be damned. First job I ever had was digging ditches. And, you know, you look at life differently when you have an opportunity to do something like this. And I'm never one of those people that crucifies myself as a writer. Oh my God, the horror of it, rolling on the floor for that one word, you know. I don't think that I want to choose a profession that makes me miserable. You know, I want to choose something that gives me joy and gives me happiness.
I'm just the same, man. Like, to me, sitting here at the keyboard is I get to play with dragons, you know, and why would I not want to play with dragons? The dragons aren't always easy to contain, but it's better than mowing the grass. It's better than digging a ditch, you know. I like what Louise Erdrich. Somebody asked Louise Erdrich once, you know, isn't writing hard? And she said, well, it's not digging sugar beets, you know, and because she's done hard work too, and working in the fields is completely different than sitting in a chair in an air conditioned room.
Well, it's hot and there's bugs and your back hurts and you go home at night and you don't feel like doing anything because you're exhausted. You know? And so no, it's tough work.
Yeah. There's always a couple of guys on the crew who, if you turn your back on them, they're going to jump you. So you've got all your radars up and you never can rest.
Oh yeah. I had some good fist fights in the rose fields. No, actually I didn't have in the rose fields. I had them in the potato fields. So I want to correct that. The rose fields, I had a nice group of people continuously, you know, but I do think that if you've done hard labor and you've done that sort of thing, then the idea that this is a terrible life, that you're sacrificing yourself for literature. I just find that ludicrous. And like you, when people talk about, do you ever have writer's block? I say, no, I have bad days sometimes. I have days where I'm not as good as normal, but I try to do 3 to 5 pages a day, and I generally always get it, and usually more. And, you know, my worst days are usually 3 pages. And do I allow myself time off? Yeah, now and again, you know, I can be foolish. But on the other hand, I work so often that if I decide to take a day off, I'm not wounded.
Yeah, no, for my wife, if I don't write, then she'll find me at the dinner table at dinner time, and I'm sitting there with my hands on the table, and my hands are just going like this because they need keys. You know, they need to be typing. And like sometimes I think that's why. Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead, please.
Or I'll follow her. I'll follow her all around the house, telling her my stories, and she'll say, "Just go to your study and do something, please."
Shut up. Go up and write. Well, you know, I would do this. I would be asleep. Karen said, and I'd be tired.
Oh wow!
Be asleep and I'd be tired. Wow! You know, and I just you know, and then sometimes I'll sit and I'll type. You know, it's just bizarre, but it gives, and it's like my wife is long suffering. You know, I've been doing this a long time. And I'll go, it's just not going well. And I'm like, oh, shut up. Go do it. And I go, you're right. I'm doing a wonderful thing. And I'm having a day where it didn't go well for me is that I got 2,000 words. That's a bad day for me. And I consider that a good day. And some days I get a lot more than that, you know? And I'm consistent. The biggest I think the biggest thing to remember as a writer is showing up and quit worrying about whether you're going to have writer's block or waiting for inspiration. Because what people forget, there is no inspiration except you. You're the muse. So you need to sit down and train your muse to show up.
For sure. Yeah, I never actually feel inspired. I feel compelled. You know, I feel like if I'm not writing, then I'm stealing air from the rest of the world. Like, that's what I'm here for, is to write, you know. And I'm
Well, it's a funny thing is when I was young and I was starting out, I'd wait for that muse because I thought that's what you were supposed to do. I never met another writer until I'd been selling for years. And so I thought that's what you were supposed to do. And then I said, well, I want to do this now. And it would be hard at first when I was learning. And then what I noticed was that muse kept showing up and inspiration kept showing up. And so one day was pretty much like another. And I realized that on the days when I felt really, the spirit of the muse, if you want to call it. And on the days I didn't, I still wrote about the same. I wrote well enough as at that point in time, anyway, I wrote as well as I could on all those days.
Yeah, no, the way I look at it is, sometimes some mornings you'll sense like a shaggy beast running past and you jump out and grab its tail and you just ride it for all it's worth. And some days you've got an ornery cow and you have to halter her up and pull her over your shoulder, but each day you get somewhere,
Exactly. It is. It's like working a mule. When they're working, it's fun, but when it's not fun.
Yeah.
Because I used to plow with a mule. I did that stuff. So
wow,
we're getting. I don't want to overrun. I guess I'm okay. Got a little time, but I know that we're going to have. We already have some questions that are going to be asked of you, possibly me. I hope they ask them of you because I'm so excited about this book, and it is your moment in time. And I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
I feel like you're like one of my nephews or something because age difference. And when I met you, and I've just seen you come along so great. I also wanted to show if I can ever get it settled right. This edition.
Yeah,
and that's a beautiful edition. That's SST. They've done some of my books. Wow.
Yep.
So
Yep.
So if you want a special edition, if there are any left, you might check out SST Publishing.
Yeah, I think I've got either 2 or 3. I think I got 3 more coming out with them too, so there'll be more coming, man.
Yeah,
they do beautiful stuff.
Good.
Man. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think they've done 4 or 5 of my books. Got a couple coming out, a bibliography, which is already out of date. I want to keep that bibliography out of date till I die.
Exactly, man. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I guess we should do that. We should open it up now for some questions. And I'm not exactly sure how that happens, but let's hear them. Let's have them. Let's do it.
There's Jennifer.
Here we go.
I will manage that. Hi, Joey. Right. Wow. What a fascinating conversation. Thank you both for sharing with us so much. And I'm going to start with a question of my own. We have some great questions, but I'd like to hear a little bit. I mean, you've talked very honestly and frankly about your not suffering writer's block, but can you talk us the nuts and bolts of your writing routine? What kind of instrument do you write on? What is your routine? You get up early in the morning and start? People always like to hear about that.
This is for me.
Both of you, please.
Yeah, Stephen.
But you
do it first, Stephen. You go first.
I started a novel on February 1st, and I just finished it yesterday, I guess it was. And this is the first novel in 18 or 19 years I've written all sitting here at a desk. Usually I'm writing in airports and on airplanes and in buses and all that stuff, but the pandemic has kept me locked in. So I've really got to I don't know, I wouldn't say know my own schedule or know my own routine, but when I was writing this novel the last 10 weeks, I would wake up, hit some breakfast, and I would come straight to the keyboard because to me, my brain isn't good for a whole day. So I like to give the good part of my brain to what I'm going to write, and I can usually get a lot of words done by noon, and then I'll break and watch something stupid on the TV to kind of reset. And then I'll come back after break, and after lunch, I still think of terms. And I'll eat a bunch of sixlets, and that'll juice me up. That'll juice me up for about 90 minutes, and I just write and write.
You just sold a lot of those.
Yeah, I usually call it quits about 2:30 or 3 in the afternoon, and then I just go do stuff. I go do the life stuff or go exercise or whatever, hang out with my family. That's always number one. But when you have, I'm a professor and, my dogs, I've got dogs and trucks and all this, I've got a lot of stuff that needs attending to, like everybody, of course. And it's hard to carve out an actual routine. I've been lucky since February to carve out a little bit of a routine, but usually I like to write a novel or a story the same way I like read a really good book. Like when Joe has a new book coming out, I like read that usually in about 2 days I'll read it, which is to say I'm reading in line at the bank. I'm reading, it's on my lap at the traffic light. It's like every little day I'm filling with reading. That's how I like to write. I like to fill every part of the day with writing that I can. And I just like to choose writing over everything but family and health,
Oh, wow. Awesome. Thank you. And how about you, Joe? What's your routine?
Well, we're pretty similar. The thing that I would say is that I have to travel a lot in the past. Of course, during all this, I haven't. But because of writing and conventions and different other, commitments, I was on the plane a lot and I was doing all that. But my favorite thing to do, and it's what I do most of the time, is I get up in the morning, I have my coffee, I have, some light piece of toast or something. I sit down, I check my email real quick. I jump over to my fan page just to make sure that I'm not neglecting anybody. But I don't overdo that. And then I sit down and I start writing right then. And then I write about 3 hours, maybe. Sometimes I only write an hour and a half, and I've done 15 pages, because it'll just come to me. But I know I have a rule that I need to do 3 to 5 pages a day. I work generally 7 days a week, at least 3 to 5 pages. But a lot of times it's more than that. So some books get written very quickly. Others, it'll keep at that lower level until I'm finished. It just depends. And now and again, and generally always, I'm working on one project at once. I have a novel here, and when I maybe work for the day, I got a little time left. I go, well, what's happening with that short story over here? And right now I have 2 novels going. I'm writing on this one, and when I end the day, I'll go, you know what, I'm going to work on that other one. And it may just be a paragraph. It may be 2 or 3 pages. Just as long as it's giving me joy and I feel the spirit in the work, I'm excited. I'm happy. And then when I get through with my 3, I usually do just like Stephen. I find like I watched the Earth Die Screaming yesterday, and it was an old pretty good actually, old 1950s science fiction film. Well, that kind of got my, kind of brought me down and just put me in the right mellow spot. And then I go down. I usually cook lunch for Karen and my wife, Karen. And then Karen and I hang. We do stuff. And then I teach martial arts still. I do it 1 night a week now. I teach private classes only. I'm still a nasty, deadly old man, and I'm keeping it up as long as my body lets me. So far, it's let me. And so I do that. I do the other things that you do. You got to go to, put the mask on, go to shopping at Walmart, go shopping at wherever it is. Here we got Walmart and pretty much Walmart. And so you do the things like that. Or maybe I want to go to the bank and deal with, this stack of giant checks that Stephen and I always get from our books. Just stacks. So I take those in and then I also deal with, phone calls to agents and producers and film. And, I'm working toward directing films. I'm working towards, I write screenplays. I work with both my children who write. So, to me, that's all. I keep the family involved too, because they want to be involved. I never push them to do it, but now that they're interested, I try to be there as a support system. So to me, it's family. Family is the core. Without my wife, I wouldn't have ever accomplished anything. I'd have been running all over the place. I'd have been in fist fights all the time. I'd have been, because I was an angry young man. I grew up in the 60s. I was an anti-war resistor. I was a civil rights guy, and I grew up in, the South in the 50s and the 60s. So it changes the way you see life.
I think there's a reason why the 2 of you ended up together. And I have to credit my colleague Jacques Lamar for having thought to have the 2 of you talk together, because you do have so much in common and such a relationship and affinity. So, and I wanted to ask directly about your writing, because I have to say that like the next most popular question is about Stephen's T-shirt and where we can get the T-shirt.
It's all me. And I got this Redbubble. I got this at Redbubble.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Redbubble?
Yeah.
Where is Redbubble? Is that in Denver?
It's just an online place, as far as I know. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So let's, wow, this question was so good and got 7 upvotes. So that means a lot of people are interested. Josh Anderson says, The Only Good Indians had me thinking a lot about the way generational trauma or generational conflict is central to slashers. Jason and his mother, the Sawyer brothers in the Texas Chainsaw films, the parents and children, blah, blah, blah. I was wondering if you could talk more about the role that generational conflict plays in building your story worlds. Maybe, too, that's how it works in the slasher, or how basketball is a kind of generational heirloom in this book. That's a great question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're right. Basketball does get handed down from generation to generation because your uncles tell you lies about how good they used to be, and you try to be that good, and you can't be that good, you know. But yeah, I mean, the slasher. I mean, one way to look at it is as a blood feud, and blood feuds are never contained. They always spill over, and like a family. Somebody from family A kills somebody from family B, so family B has to kill somebody from family A, and it just goes back and forth like that forever. And if somebody doesn't put a cap on it, then everybody in town is dead, you know. And so Denora, the final girl in The Only Good Indians, she has to find a way to put a cap on it, to not seek revenge, but to kind of use compassion to stop this process, this cycle, this bad cycle.
Wow. Really
you think about the Hatfields and the McCoys. They had a feud that went on for years and years and years, you know.
Yeah, they don't do nobody much good, but I guess when you're in it, you feel like you got to be in it too, you know.
Right. So well, you know, the South is famous for feuds. The South is famous for feuds. You know, that's one thing. You know, somebody, swipe somebody's pig or look bad at their goat or something. It can be that simple. You know, or didn't marry their sister after they said they would, and then that doesn't just make somebody mad right then. It makes them mad forever. The whole family goes on and on and on. And sometimes you talk to people, and I swear that this is true. And this is when I was younger. You know, what started this? Nobody remembered. Why are these two families always fist fighting and always in trouble, and you know, and always having these problems with one another? What's this feud over? I don't know. I don't remember. But we don't like them.
No, you just kind of inherit the animosity, you know, and you don't question it.
So I'm going to follow up on that and ask: Is that a uniquely American phenomenon, or do you think that exists elsewhere in the world?
I think, weren't the Vikings bad about blood feuds? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, you know, you talk to the Italians, and you know, I go to Italy all the time. It's one of my favorite places in the world. It's my second home to me. They have feuds. Every country you go to them, there's somebody that had a feud with someone for some reason or another. And like I say, it's not always a reason that anyone knows. Sometimes it's just based on color. You know, I don't like those people because they're that color. I don't like those people because they have a different religion. I don't like those people for whatever foolish reason, because they are all foolish. They're, you know, most feuds are. The only kind of feud I understand is when it's in the immediate and someone's trying to hurt you and you're trying to hurt them back. I understand self-defense, that happens. But the fact that maybe that's over with and now people carry that on with one another, I don't think that's a very positive result. Yeah,
it's weird to reduce like people to a class or a type and just have resentment towards that whole class or type or whatever, however you are organizing people. It's weird to think like that, you know. But that's how like Jason Voorhees in the slasher, he doesn't like camp counselors, and that's what he believes, you know. That's what he's gonna do.
Oh. and
I got a camp counselor problem.
It's very specific. I want to thank Maureen and our audience. She has posted a link to purchase the It's All Native Land t-shirt. So thank you, Maureen, for your help. So the next most popular question was posted originally by Christina Baptista. She says, I'm a high school American literature teacher brainstorming ways to possibly introduce to students and teach The Only Good Indians in class. Is there any particular point or moment about or in the novel you'd want to ensure that young people got or investigated the most, or a general point about your writing as a whole you're most concerned about readers' understanding? Thank you.
I guess it's kind of what Joe was saying earlier, that you don't, or I don't anyways, and Joe was saying he doesn't. I don't come to a novel I'm going to write with like a checklist or an agenda. Like, I better talk about this. I better talk about this. I better talk about this. All I want to do is put real people on the page. And if those real people are Blackfeet, then I've got to, then putting real Blackfeet on the page also means in order to make them real, I've got to make their world real. And in the world that they live in, there's going to be pushback, and there's going to be expectations and responsibilities and stereotypes and stuff. And it's always weird to me because people talk about this novel in terms of like social commentary, and I'm like, I don't got no social commentary. I just got real people. That's what it feels like to me. So if anything, I would just say, take these people as real people if you can, if they feel real to you.
That is social commentary, Stephen. That is social commentary. But just because it came out of an honest place. I'm going to add something here. It's a little bit off the trail, but to be a good writer, you also have to be a tremendous reader. I'm fortunate. I read very fast. I retain what I read pretty well. And I've always had, that's my only superpower. After that, I'm out, but I can read fast and retain it. But the thing is, read a lot and not just in the genre that you think you love above all things, because it may not be true. And don't accept that because something is old, it should be forgotten. If you want to learn how to write some really good sentences, read Ernest Hemingway. You may have all kinds of faults and things about Hemingway. I know I have some. Or F. Scott Fitzgerald or Faulkner or Flannery O'Connor. And some of these people aren't going to, they're going to have areas where they might disturb you. But good fiction frequently is disturbing. Sometimes in the right ways, sometimes in the wrong ways where they carry racism over with them. But, to throw them out because that happened is to lose some of the greatest literature ever written, some of the greatest insights ever written. And when I think of, the writer that means the most to me is Mark Twain, by the way. And Mark Twain is, in my view, the greatest American writer who ever lived. That doesn't mean other people like Hemingway and Fitzgerald didn't bring it into another, era, but it does mean that he invented the American novel, as far as in my belief. And I think that he dealt with racism. He dealt with people. He dealt with kindness. He dealt with disappointment. He was a satirist. It was a great, just pure storyteller. And I love him for that. And when I hear people say, we want to ban, Mark Twain because of some of the language is offensive, when he uses it purposely to be offensive in the correct way, to show you how offensive this viewpoint is. A word means nothing, or a character means nothing out of context. It has to be something that's in context. Like, I'm not going to be reading the Turner Diaries because I know its context, but I know Mark Twain's context, Harper Lee's context. I know Stephen's context. And I try to read everybody. I try to take, I want there to be diversity in fiction. I want there to be a modern view. I want more women writing novels and short stories, working in genres. I want more ethnic groups bringing their past. But I also believe that everybody has the right to write about any group they want, is they can write honestly. Because here's the bottom line: we're all humans. There are differences. There are things that Stephen's experience is going to be different than mine, but closer to mine than people might think. And so there's a way of doing that. You can't do that. Otherwise, what you start doing is you start segregating people. You start saying you can only do this because you're from the South. You can only do this because you're native. You can only do this because you're black or female. That's no way to end things. You've got to say, look, there are things wrong with certain things. And some of the stories in the past and novels had things wrong about them. But man, if you read Hills Like White Elephants by Ernest Hemingway, or you read The Killers by Ernest Hemingway, or you read The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and so on, these guys gave us the tools, and very few of us are touching them yet.
Yeah, and what Joe said earlier about him retaining, Joe is like a walking encyclopedia. He can cite. It seems like he can cite every book he's ever seen. I'm so jealous of that ability, that superpower. But like I see a line of like influence or inheritance, really, like from Mark Twain to Kurt Vonnegut. I think they were very similar writers.
Yeah,
finally, and
yes.
But I totally agree. We need to read outside our fields. Like if you think of, like you've got a horror field, a science fiction field, there's fields all across, the county. if you stay in your own field, it's gonna be kind of insular and inbred. You've got to go walk through strange fields, like go walk through a nonfiction book about botany or something, and you'll get burrs sticking to your pants leg, and you'll come back to your own field, and those burrs will fall off your pants leg, and they'll grow up into weird flowers in the horror fields.
Right.
That's what we need.
Right.
That's what we need.
Absolutely. And the thing when I think of Mark Twain, I think that here is the guy that really taught us all how to be American writers. And then he didn't say this is the only way to do it, but he opened that door for the rest of us to go through. And that means every generation. I mean, you might say Hemingway was the most important writer of the 20th century. I would pretty much agree, at least the first half. I would say Stephen King may be the most important writer of the second half of the 20th century. And that doesn't keep him from writing now. But I think his impact is just as much as Hemingway or Twain or in this era and in this time, and just as important.
Yeah, I think so too.
I do a lot of hosting of these programs, and I got to say, this is one of the most interesting discussions I've been privy to. So thank you so much. We have some more questions. This is one from Victoria, who says, in The Only Good Indians, Lewis's immediate acknowledgement with the supernatural and innate navigation of the rules surrounding the Elks' haunting were so refreshing to encounter in the first act of a horror novel. Do you think mainstream horror could benefit from engaging with the mindset of non-Western cultures where the first reaction to the supernatural isn't denial? I do. That's a great question.
That's a great idea, and I wish I could say I did that on purpose. But what really happened was I owed Ellen Datlow a novella, and I tried to write one, and it turned into a novel. I tried to write another, it turned into a novel, and I was like, dang, do I not know how to write a novella? And so I wrote the first part of The Only Good Indians, The House That Ran Red. And I got to the end, and I texted my agent, and I said, hey, should I turn this into a novel, or do you mean cap it off as a novella? And she said, go ahead and turn it into a novel. Those are easier to sell. So that's the reason that happens early. That's the reason I was lucky enough to break that mold. It was just that I was writing a shorter piece. I was writing a 110-page piece,
Well, we appreciate your candor on that. Thank you.
All novels and stories in many ways for writers, I think, like us, and there are a lot of us, we don't know what they are sometimes. I mean, I generally can sense something's a novel or a short story, but it isn't always true.
Yeah.
True.
Man, for sure. Well, with Mongrels, I was just writing werewolf stories for a couple of weeks, and then I thought, if I make these characters have the same name, this might be a novel, and so it turned into a novel, but I wasn't trying to write a novel. I was just screwing around with werewolves.
So a number of people kind of want to know things. What do you watch? What do you read? What are you watching on TV? Stuff that's similar to the genres in which you work, completely different. And I'm kind of blending together a number of questions here to pose to both of you.
Joe, you can go first, man.
Well, I have a wide variety of things I watch in the same way that I have a wide variety in things I read. Sometimes I love old science fiction movies, but I love noir films as well. I love dramas. I love some musicals. I generally like musicals on the stage more than I like them on film for some reason. But today I watched half of, and I got to finish The Chase, which starred Marlon Brando. Arthur Penn directed. Lillian Hellman wrote the screenplay, as I remember, but based on a Horton Foote script, a stage play. Horton Foote was a great Texan. He did the script for To Kill a Mockingbird, which is one of the greatest adaptations of all time.
And he did Tender Mercies. Yeah. Tender Mercies is so good.
That's right. Tender Mercies, which was redone as Crazy Heart and pretended that Tender Mercies didn't exist. And Robert Duvall has a small part in that one. Yeah. Okay. I'm through. But it's all kinds of things. I also like heavy things. I like light things. It's like, people say, well, don't you just read for entertainment? Of course I do. But a lot of different things entertain me. Like I can read Kafka and I'm entertained, but I can read Hemingway and I'm entertained, but I can read Edgar Rice Burroughs and I'm entertained,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Talking about noir, I just watched for the first time that French movie Elevator to the Gallows, and that was an amazing movie.
Oh, yeah.
That movie, fantastic. It was like every frame was just perfect, and the score, that Miles Davis improvised score. Yeah, that was just the most beautiful film.
There's a Japanese film that's a noir film that you can see Tarantino took a lot of shots out of it, and I think it's called something like Broken Blossoms or something. And it's about a kind of Bonnie and Clyde character in a sense. It's about this guy who's a gangster and this woman who is intrigued with him to this severe point, and so it just leads to their destruction in a way, especially his. And it is such a strange. I'll look it up, Stephen, and I'll get you the name, because I saw it a long time ago. I think I saw it in Berkeley when I was, I lived in Berkeley briefly, and I would go over and watch the movies for a quarter. 50% on campus.
But it's hard to say like what do I watch, because like Joe, I watch all over the spectrum, but I can say what I'm reading right now. Like right now I'm between volumes 4 and 5 of Black Hammer, that Jeff Lemire comic series, which I'm absolutely in love with. I'm reading Richard Chizmar's Chasing the Boogeyman. It comes out in August, I think.
I read that.
It's good. And last night the movie I watched was Slacks, about that pair of jeans that kills people in a store, and it kills the heck out of them, let me tell you, man. And TV, let me think. Television. I'm on the 3rd season of Vikings right now and having a ball, man.
Yeah. Well, the third piece, you should watch Sinners. It's got 3 great. So the guy that I'm reading, just finished. I've read him all my life, but I just read Deadville by Robert F. Jones, who also wrote Bloodsport, and he wrote The Diamond Bogo and Slade's Glacier. They're crazy books. They're wonderful books, and they're sort of like Hemingway on crack or something. They're just these odd, and his writing style is incredible. And like Bloodsport is these people go fishing for prostitutes by hooking little taxis on and throwing them in this river that runs through the entire world. It's a singular river. And there's just these crazy things like that. And, they reel them in the taxis. And the Diamond Bogo, the water buffalo has a diamond encrusted in the center of its head. And it has all of these pygmies of that era in Africa who live in English Tudor houses. And it's just an amazing writer. I think you'd really like it.
All right. I can see how you get from Philip Jose Farmer to that, because that's a very similar imaginative space.
And for our audience,
Phil was a friend too.
I'd like to point out that this program is being recorded, and you can view it again anytime you like, and the chat stays live. So any of you, including Stephen and Joe, if you want to add some of these things to our chat after the program ends, I think people would appreciate some of the references. And so just follow the same link that you came to register for the program itself, and keep the conversation going. Are you two willing to answer 1 or 2 more questions?
Sure.
I'm running out of time. I've got a sense of joy when I'm talking about this stuff.
Well, I'm going to say again, I kind of in keeping with what we've been saying, I, as a middle-aged white woman living in New England, without reading a book like this, I don't have any real connection with this culture, and until I read this book, and then there's so much that I understand, and that's really one of the major points, isn't it? To kind of share worlds and share experiences. Even with
all worlds done well are the truth, and all worlds done well are a lie, because we all come from our own perspective, and there are people that may have had the same experience, and they'll go, "What are you talking about? It wasn't like that." And that always shocks me, because as I've gotten older and I've talked to friends, they'll go, "Well, that time." So I said, "That's not the way I remember it, but we both remember it as real to us." And that's the beauty of the book. It's this you're taking the truth. I mean, to me, fiction reaches you as the truth much better than nonfiction, because it's telling you how people feel, how people think. It's telling you about their emotions, their fantasies, and all of that. So to me, each person has their own, so it varies.
Yeah. No, I think fiction can change the facts to make it more true. It feels like, Oh,
wow.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
So one more
question. It's the lie that tells the truth.
The lie that tells the truth.
Yeah.
This is from Julio. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. In the last decades, we've seen many different themes and styles in horror literature. What do you think is the big theme or the big change in the genre in recent years, particularly given different social contexts? And I would add to that, has COVID changed the situation at all?
Man, I bet Joe's probably got a better sense of this than I do, because I think Joe reads more than I do. I read a lot, but I think Joe reads more than I do.
Well, I don't read as much horror as people think. That doesn't mean I don't read it, because I do. But I'm not somebody that goes, well, boy, I'm just going to read. I don't. I read all kinds of things. But what I've noticed, and I think that is probably, I think I could say this without being wrong, one of the few things, I think ethnic fiction in horror is on the rise, and there's a lot more of it. And I think there are a lot more women in horror since the late 80s, actually, and it's just grown as time has gone on. I think that probably the small press which tells you what's going on in horror better than the larger press, because there isn't that many horror books comparatively. And but to me, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm a master of what's going on in that genre and what its evolution is outside of that, which I think I'm accurate about, because I really don't read a lot of it, in the sense of regular reading. I don't dodge it, but I don't say I got to go find the next horror book.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I read it. I read horror, but I read science fiction. And also, as you know, Joe, I read a lot of paleoanthropology about Neanderthals,
Yeah, me too.
Right?
I majored in anthropology, and obviously I didn't finish. We send each other Neanderthal stuff, I do all the sending. Of course, Steven's on the other end going, God, was he going to quit? When's he going to quit? But I read all this stuff. He and I, when I was at, I think I was visiting, I think we were in Colorado, and I saw some stuff that you had, that collection of Neanderthal that I think Isaac Asimov and Greenberg put together. Yeah. And I looked through it, and I'd read most of those stories. And I wrote a paper once that made me leave a class when I was very young at University of Texas. Another reason I didn't finish, that said that the obvious thing is Neanderthals and modern men, as we call them, mated. And they said that can't happen. I said it had to have happened. So no, it didn't happen. Well, now they know that. And now they even have things where they have some idea how they spoke. And they spoke in a real high voice, if this is correct. Yeah. And because they looked at the bones and the throats and the structure of the head. And they would talk like this. They had a real high voice. They had some guy who was a voice expert that tried to give you, and believe me, that was hard for me because I have a somewhat deep voice. But they have a kind of high voice, according to this guy. And they had this actor who was supposed to duplicate how that sounded until he found that voice. And I thought, well, that's why they didn't make it. People got tired of that voice. Yeah.
I think their voice.
They did make it. They mated with everybody. Yeah.
No, they did. Yeah. I mean, they made it, and therefore
they made things. They had art. They weren't this hulking brutes that people think. Did you read the Neanderthals necklace? The Neanderthals
Is that
necklace?
One of the stories?
It's a book about art and structure, and
I haven't read that.
It's a little old. I mean, even it's out of date, but it's fascinating.
Okay, all right.
If I come across it again, I'll send it to you. It's worth reading.
Right.
A little dense.
Thank you. No, I'm all for dense. I'm reading a book on Dennis Ovens right now, and it's like more scientific than I am, but I'm loving it so much. Talking horror, like what's changed? I think that was a question. Like, what's the trend in the last X amount of years or whatever? I mean, who knows? But I do think that Joe's right. We're seeing a higher diversity of voices coming through, which is wonderful, which is changing the genetic structure of horror. And also, I feel like in the last 15 or 20 years, that, Stephen King, Joe was saying Stephen King's probably the most important writer of the latter part of the 20th century. And I agree with that. I think what Stephen King has seeded into the world of horror is the undeniable fact that we don't care about dummies being pushed into a meat grinder. We care about real people being pushed into a meat grinder, and so I think a lot of horror it's not necessarily slowed down, but it's gone to greater efforts to put real people on the page other than just people to catch a machete in the head. I mean, there's a level of fun there. Right.
Yeah. Well, when I was writing horror, I wrote a number of things that were published as horror and have become horror classics that have no supernatural in them at all. They deal with racial issues. They deal with the South. They deal with where I grew up, and they deal with it openly and brutally. And, you can have some people read, oh my God, how that must be racist, when it's obviously just the opposite. And so I've used that as a vehicle to write about my life's experiences and things that have happened to me, and to make sometimes satirical cuts at things that I think are ugly and wrong. And so to me, horror doesn't necessarily have anything to do with supernatural if you don't want it to, but it can have everything to do with it. I'm not a supernatural believer, but I love to read it. You know, if I'm reading it, I'm in it. I'm believing it then. You know, no matter what its base is, be it Islamic horror, be it Christian horror, Jewish horror, none of those. Lovecraftian horror. And Lovecraft probably has had more effect on horror fiction than any writer. And, you know, he's been called out legitimately for racism and things like that. But people who say we want to cancel Lovecraft forget they're canceling part of themselves as writers, because that DNA is in you, baby, whether you know it or not. I read people all the time, and you can see that. In fact, I think the writers who were influenced by him, I knew Bob Bloch a little before he died, several years before he died. And he was heavily influenced by him, but he was able to move on and go other places. But he was always able to touch that little Lovecraftian feel when he wanted to.
Nice.
I cannot think of an author conversation that has yielded more quotable quotes than this evening's. Thank you both. I almost forgot we're talking about this book. So if you did not feel compelled to purchase it beforehand, I can't imagine that you're not compelled to purchase it now. This version that I'm holding is the one we have in the store, and you do get a signed copy. And again, your purchase supports the Mark Twain House and Museum. You know, before we leave, I just want to say the Mark Twain House is a writer's home and a home for writers. And Joe, you've been part of our family already. Stephen, I hope you now feel part of our family of writers. And I really hope to have you back with us again and again as soon as possible. And thank you for sharing this brilliant evening with us both. And thank you to our audience for the really good questions. And thank you to Jacques Lamar, my friend and colleague, who had the idea to put the two of you together. It's been really just so much fun.
That's great.
So thank you all.
Great. Thanks for having us.
No.
Thank you
so good night, everybody, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Goodbye.
Adios.
Adios.